Good morning, class. I wanted to go over the tornado speech and have you kind of look at the template that I want you to use. And what I want you to notice about this is basically what you can do is subtract all the tornado speech information and put your own information in there. So basically you'll notice here that there's the attention getter from the template. Just delete it and then put your own attention getter in there. Now, there's some things I want you to notice about this. Your first draft of this speech, and that'll be about 500 words, as we discussed in the other video, and it will have at least 3 of your sources of the 6 total that you're going to put in there. Now, a couple of things I want you to do with this is first, if you will, knock this out and put your name as the header so that or at least your first initial and last name so that I know whose paper I'm looking at. And then also I'd like you to knock out the reference to the tornadoes here too. So make sure that you put something else in there, whatever your topic is. Then you want to come down here and erase these and fill in what's my purpose. That's going to be your general purpose to inform my audience about tornadoes. My thesis, well, this is going to mirror what's down here, which is in order to better understand tornadoes, let's explore what causes tornadoes to develop, how researchers classify them, and how odd occurrences and some odd occurrences that may occur. So, or that are associated, sorry. So you'll notice you want to have all of these elements. You'll notice that if you look back at the framer, I actually gave you these so that you could fill them in. So knock those out and fill in with your own information. Now, attention getter is going to be something that, gets your audience into listening to you and some piece of information, a fact, a statistic, a shocking quote, or an interesting quote. The relevance is why should your audience listen to you? So it's not necessarily about, your relevance in the universe, but why should your audience listen to you? Now, credibility is just a brief explanation about your personal credibility, so it doesn't have to be overly dramatic. You don't have to be you don't necessarily have to have a degree in something to talk about it. You'll notice here that the author of this one said, I grew up in the heart of Tornado Alley, and I've been interested in weather phenomena for a long time. Also, I'm a trained weather spotter. So that's enough for personal credibility. You don't have to go into a long, overly built credibility section. And the realistic part, or the part of this I want you to understand is the introduction should only be about a minute of your speech. The other 3 points that you're going to make should take up the body of the speech, should take up the majority of the speech. So 45 seconds to a minute or so, maybe a little bit longer on the introduction, but you don't want to try and say everything you're going to say in the speech in the introduction, but you do want to preview the information you're going to talk about. Then you'll notice that it goes in the order of what they mentioned. So first, they're going to talk about what causes tornadoes. Now, this is your transition. They're using a signpost. Initially, I'll crash through the causes. You don't have to be that cute. If you want to say, first let's talk about whatever. That's fine. So you don't have to kind of have a play on words in order to make this valid. But you're going to end up, just like we did in the speech framer, you're going to end up with 2 pieces of information, or so subsections of each main point. So what causes? Okay, so first we're talking about what are the things that are needed for a tornado to happen, and then also the person has included some information about where they're most likely to happen based on the environment or the atmosphere in certain areas. Okay, so we're on to our next one. Now that we've crashed through the causes of a tornado, which we would call an internal review of what you've talked about, and then you move on to, let's twist around different categories. So you'll notice here that uh, Dr. David Ludlum, and I would actually like you to put your sources in italics instead of putting them in parenthetical citation, because when we're doing speeches, the audience doesn't have a chance to see our sources, so we want to say them in the speech, and that gives us borrowed credibility. So we want to know that Dr. David Ludlum, who is the National Audubon Society's field, or is an author in this document, is our source. And it talks about the Fujita-Pearson tornado intensity scale. So you notice that, and then also, according to the Tornado Project online, uh, although violent tornadoes account for 2%, they also are responsible for 67% of the deaths. And then also you do want to here put that in italics, and so that we know who the person is and then what magazine that they're writing in. And then their third point, or oddities, was now that we better understand causes and types, again, internal review, we'll blow through some of the oddities. That's a preview. So you'll want to be doing something like that in all of your transitions. Something I want you to notice that when you do an essay, usually your transition sentence is the last sentence in the paragraph, but I like you to build them outside of the points, so that you have a sense of the progression of your speech as well as your audience. Okay, so you'll also see here's the list of oddities. First one he talks about is one in November 1915 that had the greatest number of things that were kind of weird about it. And then he also reports, or he or she reports, about this phenomenon called plucked chicken, where chickens sometimes have all of their feathers removed by, or either by the tornado, or basically because of the stress of the tornado. Now, also you'll notice the transition in this speech I've explored. So you don't have to say that exactly, but if you'll say something that lets your audience know that you're finishing up, and then you'll have a conclusion, which the conclusion should be about 30 to 45 seconds long, and your thesis slash summary needs to mirror your preview all the way back up here. It needs to look a lot like that, because you're mentioning the 3 points that you're going to talk about here. You talk about them, and then you come down here and remind your audience, this is what I talked about. And then also you want to have a memorable close. So you want to come in here and do something to help your audience remember what the speech was about, something that'll kind of spark their memory about it, or something that was kind of neat or interesting that they can understand about it. So this is just kind of a brief overview of the tornado speech, and I just want you to understand that this is going to be your next version of your draft.